The city of Johannesburg continues to impress on the continent when it comes to infrastructure development and hosting major events. That's because it's recognized as being one of the most developed cities in Africa. A large part of the city's budget goes towards investing in projects that will further position the city as a gateway to Africa. To discuss, I'm joined by the MMC of Finance for Johannesburg, Geoffrey Makhubo. Welcome to Joburg Tomorrow. Great to have you on the show, Geoffrey.
Thank you very much. Great to be here, Noshina.
Now, you have a very ambitious budget allocation for the next 6 months of this year. How difficult is it to draw up a budget for a city like Johannesburg? What considerations do you have to take into account?
Well, Johannesburg has a very expansionary budget that seeks to invest in infrastructure in a way that's counter-cyclical to the economic downturn. Its objectives are threefold. One is to ensure that we keep the economy running and people employed and ensuring that at least there's no downturn in Johannesburg, because it's an important economic hub, not only for Gauteng but for South Africa. So it's got economic objectives. The second objective relates to ensuring that we reinstate, replenish, renew old infrastructure, because Johannesburg is an old city, 130 years old. So the infrastructure has been laid out probably 50, 60 years ago. Things have changed. Issues of climate change. Johannesburg is now hotter and wetter. We've got extended rainy seasons, and the intensity of the rains are heavier. So the stormwater that was laid out 50 years ago is not sufficient for the amount of water that comes to Johannesburg now and into the future. So the second objective is to replenish infrastructure and ensure that we renew the infrastructure. The last is to deal with the backlogs. There's in-migration into Johannesburg. We receive about 200,000 people per year in Johannesburg. So the infrastructure won't cope. So there's backlog, there's social infrastructure, libraries,
the city is
parks.
growing all the time, huh?
The city is growing. So hence the concept of the corridors of freedom and all those, to ensure that there are growth nodes that we invest in and all that. So it's expansionary in that way. It's ambitious. However, we don't have an option. As to remain a world-class African city, to remain on top, you have to spend that amount of money that we're spending.
Interesting that you should talk about the heavy rains, because we saw the amount of damage that it caused to the roads. But these challenges come up whenever they do come up, and we have to deal with it. It would make sense for a city like Johannesburg, given its premier position on the continent, to have a fairly large allocation when it comes to capital expenditure. How did you come up with the latest numbers when it comes to capital expenditure?
Well, they came out from our interaction with communities, our research during the GDS process. When we started in 2011, at the beginning of our term of office, we went on an extensive consultative process, including desktop, having professors, universities, business, students, and the rest of the city's residents, having a chat with them and say, what type of Joburg would you like to see in 2040? Then we described the type of Joburg and then worked backwards, and we did a gap analysis, and it was quite clear that key to that was infrastructure. Well, there are other issues as well: social cohesion, growth of the economy, ensuring that we have a world-class functioning city government, and those sorts of things. So then we decided that over the next 10 years, we have to spend 100 billion rands on infrastructure as the first decade contribution to the three-decade program. And hence, then we had to work backwards, have an infrastructure plan, cut it into annual plans. Now we do it in 3-year cycles. That's how we came to the number. So the infrastructure people would come and say, look, the M2, M1 double-decker section needs refurbishing, because the drainage system of the M2 is not sufficient to carry the amount of water. So people then divert into the inner city when it's raining and it causes a gridlock in the inner city. What's the impact on the economy? What's the impact on people's, just the well-being, the well-being of people, because they get very grumpy when they're in traffic for a long time. So you don't want a grumpy society. You want a society that's smiling and all that. So then the Johannesburg Roads Agency will go back and say, this is what we need to do to ensure to fix the M1, M2. Then that's how we came up with these numbers. However, there's an important element. There's a wish list. And there's a carrying capacity of our balance sheet. Can we afford it? Can we afford to do it? So somewhere in between, our job in finance is to balance the two, to ensure that Joburg remains Joburg and to ensure that we can afford it. We don't collapse the city in the process.
I think it's quite an interesting, fascinating process, what you've just shared with us. How do you actually, following that process, confirm that you get the money that you need from the fiscus?
Well, we fund our infrastructure in three ways. The one is the fiscus. We do get some allocations from national, although they are about 30% of our capital program. And the second is loans. We raised the green bond. You're there. We raised the green bond this year for 1.4 billion rands, 1.485 billion rands. So it becomes a second funding mechanism.
So that's part of the private sector buy-in? That's
part of the private sector buy-in. So it's an investment in private sector investment in infrastructure. The third is self-financing. So we make a surplus in the sale of water and electricity. And that surplus is used to create a reserve that we then reinvest in expanding the capital infrastructure of the city.
That's quite wise.
In the private sector, that will be distributed as dividends because it's profit for us. It's money that we need. The important part is that we don't punish the consumer, we don't punish the customer. We try and reduce the amount of expenditure, operational expenditure that we have.
I think it's encouraging to see how you're attracting private sector investment into the city's development. One of the criticisms that many economists leveled against the city was that it's more of a consumption budget and not so much a investment budget.
No, in fact, if you read my budget speech, I said we're moving from consumption to investment because that's precisely what we're doing. We're just generating these surpluses. We're trimming down employee costs. We're trimming down general costs. The large part of our OPEX was impairments of debtors. So debtors were not paying us. We're trimming that off because we're focusing on cash collection and all that. So we're working very, very hard to ensure that we expand our base to fund capital infrastructure. So yeah, it's a process. It's not an event. In fact, the criticism was the other way around. That why didn't you reduce the surplus and not increase the rates and not increase the water tariffs and not increase? And I was saying no, but the focus is there's a trade-off. If you don't invest in infrastructure, then people say we won't pay you your rates and taxes because the city is in disarray and all that. Your infrastructure is collapsing. So we balance the two. Somebody must pay for it. However, we're looking at how to help the customer because the customer is stretched because of other external factors like petrol price increases, interest increases, and all those. These are not within our control, they're beyond our
it's
control.
like running a business. You have to look at your cost allocation. You have to make sure you get the best, most efficient rate of return for your investments as well. And you said the counter-cyclical impact of investing in infrastructure is the creation of jobs. It opens up the economy as well.
Yes.
So those are the positive trade-offs when it comes to the justifying the higher rates and taxes, etc.
True. I mean, we keep our increases within CPI, and most of these increases are pass-through increases because these are retail. I mean, these are wholesale increases. So when we retail, we just pass through the wholesale increases. But we have to ask ourselves a key question. Do you only keep the ones who are employed and just pass these benefits? Or do you try and balance and get the job market up as well? So our contribution is ensuring that we spread the rent, we stretch the rent, we invest in infrastructure in the city, we get people working, we get the city pumping. So And we're preparing for the future, because we're not only doing it for now, we're doing it for our children, our grandchildren, for them to inherit the future in a city that has been looked after. We didn't.
Keep up the great work, MMC. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you very much. It was good to be here.
We hope to hear more from you on those very ambitious infrastructure development programs that will no doubt shift the city of Johannesburg, taking it forward to becoming a global city region. Thank you.
I'll be glad to come and share some of our thoughts. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.